Hello creeps! Andy here, and today I wanted to rank for you all of the thriller books I have read this year. I think I'm going to do this for all of the books that I've read, but I don't know, I was looking through them and there's just something different about thriller books to me. Like well, we'll get into that in a second, but I just thought it would be maybe more interesting if I took all the thriller books and did those separately. So that's what we have here today. The ones on top are just the cozy mysteries, just so it doesn't give away what's underneath it. So these are ranked from my least favorite book that I've read this year to my most favorite book that I've read this year. They are separated into 3 categories. The categories are okay, because I'm so original and I couldn't think of anything else. Anyways, my cozy mysteries will not be in here because I love them all. The Murder in the Mix, the Addison Moore ones, and they're all, you know, near the top. So those ones aren't in there, but all the other ones are just plain thriller mysteries. Really quick though, before we get into it, just know that I have a weird relationship with thriller books. I have a love-hate relationship. Oftentimes I find them very predictable. I find them not as satisfying as a lot of other books. But then once I find good thriller books, they are like the most fun books to read. But because there's so many thrillers that are published, it seems like every day, I feel like you do gotta read a bunch of okay books to get to the good stuff. Also know that I'm never ever telling you, even if a book's not for me, that you shouldn't purchase it. That's never the point of my channel. I'm just going to give you my own opinions. And also a lot of these writers that are in the lower categories, they either have books that are in the higher categories, or I've read books last year that I actually really enjoyed. So I'll definitely be bringing those up as well. I just don't want it to seem like I'm talking badly about somebody's work, you know? But otherwise, let's just get into it. This one, I'm actually going to switch this one into this category. I'm going to move this here and then this one here. Okay, so let's just start from the very bottom. My least favorite book of the year. And that was this guy right here, Alice Feeney's His and Hers. Okay, so let me start out by saying that I don't hate Alice Feeney. I actually enjoy her writing. I have her book here, Rock, Paper, Scissors. I read that one a few months ago. I thought it was a blast. This one, I did not enjoy as much. It's about a woman that's murdered in a town. You have a newscaster named Anna Andrews, and she doesn't really want to cover the case, but she ends up going back to cover the story. And then you have Detective Jack Harper, who's suspicious of her involvement until he becomes a suspect in his own murder investigation. That's all it says. So it's really, really super vague on the back. And there are a few things that I didn't like about this. One, these little lines in here, and she does this in Rock, Paper, Scissors too, but there are so many in here. I'm just gonna read a few quotes and I'll try to like remember what my issue was with the writing. But it says and not that there's an issue with the writing, but just that it brought me out of the writing, you know? Okay, so for example, something like this. His messy gray eyebrows made an exaggerated effort to stretch across his heavily lined forehead, like long-lost friends who only fight when they finally meet in the middle. Like, there were some lines like that I was just like, what are you trying to say? Oh, this one, and I bite my tongue so often I'm surprised it doesn't have a hole. I actually like this quote, but it's the same line as in Rock, Paper, Scissors. I remembered it because I highlighted it in Rock, Paper, Scissors. Oh, these. Lives are like light bulbs. They're not as hard to change as people think. Those are everywhere in this book. What even is that? Lives are like light bulbs. They're not as hard to change. It's not a simile, right? So is it a metaphor? But just whatever that is, whatever those lines are, they are in every page of this book, and they just took me out of the story. We tend to categorize people the way we categorize books. If they don't fit neatly into a genre, we're not sure what to make of them. There's a curtain we all hide behind. The only difference is who pulls it aside. Those were both on the same page. Like shoes, the stories we tell about ourselves get bigger with age. It's just not my favorite type of writing. But truthfully, my issue with the story was the killer. Like, it was so unbelievably unbelievable, and maybe it's because of, I'm not going to give too much away, but maybe it's because of my own personal experience that reading the story and finding out who the killer was, I was like, that is not possible, sir. It's just not gonna happen. Like, it just seemed silly to me. I didn't understand why this person did the killing for some of the people. Like, it just, I don't know. I had a lot of discrepancies with this guy. So that's why it's least on my list. That doesn't mean that I don't think that it was well written. That doesn't mean that I wasn't entertained by a lot of the story. And just benefit of the doubt, that one, at least I didn't know what was coming. You know, I feel like thrillers are really predictable, and that one, guess what? Did not predict. Because it was a little silly for me, but you know, at least it wasn't overly predictable. But I don't know, that's how I feel about this one. I don't like doing these. I don't like talking about books negatively, so you know, I'm gonna feel better once we get to this category. But the next one on my list is Shari Lapina's Someone We Know. This one was about a young boy who breaks into houses, and he breaks into people's computers and gets personal information, and it's just kind of like a high for him. And there's a woman who goes missing. Oh, okay, she is found murdered. I didn't know if the back said she went missing or she's murdered. And so you have this whole neighborhood that's just kind of intertwined somehow in this woman's murder, and the people in the neighborhood are trying to put together the pieces and figure out who murdered the person. Now, here's the thing. Shari Lapina books aren't always my favorite. I don't love the way that they're written. They're very just like, well, this one, he slips inside the door and closes it quietly behind him. His heart thumping. He puts his card into his pocket and takes out a small flashlight and turns it on. That's the entire book. It wasn't how I prefer books to be written, you know? That's all it is. And this one also, the only other thing that bothered me was like, once the women, like their husbands were somehow related to the person that was murdered, every single wife on the block was like, oh, my husband obviously killed her. The whole time reading the book, I'm like, you could not convince me my husband murdered someone, you know? Like, I just thought it was so wild how quick everybody was to be like, oh, my husband did it, or even have any sort of suspicions. And I don't know, I've never been in that situation, but I just cannot believe that I would be that quick to be like, oh, obviously he murdered someone. Like, who are you married to? What kind of relationship is this? So I don't know, that was that one. However, the Shari Lapina book that I do like is called, I think it's called The Unwanted Guest, because it's like a perfect whodunit. That present tense worked so well, and I really enjoyed that book. So it's not that I dislike this writer, it's just that the writing style doesn't really match what I personally enjoy reading. Okay. Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. Before we get into this one, I need to tell you, I just started reading Riley Sager books, I think last year, and already I have every book he's ever written. I really enjoy his work. I love his female lead characters. I always seem to find something in myself in those characters. But this one was not my favorite. In fact, I think it might be my least favorite Riley Sager book. And it's for a few reasons. First of all, it's about these two young boys. What's this guy's name again? I just read this book. I should know his name. Ethan and Billy. And one night they're sleeping in a tent together, or they sleep in the tent together like once a week, you know, fun camp out in the backyard. And one night Ethan wakes up to find that the tent is ripped and Billy has been abducted. And so for 30 years, Ethan kind of carries this mystery of what happened to Billy with him throughout the story. And so you do have multiple timelines of past and present, and he does this a lot with a lot of his books, like this one, The Only One Left. Actually, I think even Home Before Dark, you do have multiple timelines as well. Oh, same with The Last Time I Lied. That one has multiple timelines. And then these two, I don't think so. But a lot of the time he kind of messes with time, and there's a lot of multiple elements in it. So for example, you have this woman who murdered her family, her parents, when she was younger, and then you have her older, and then you have a nurse that comes in and takes care of her, and then you have the nurse's history behind that, and then you have all the other people that work there, and then you have this dilapidated mansion that's falling apart. So there are so many elements that kind of keep you engaged throughout the whole story. With this one, the whole story, Ethan's just like, I wonder what happened to Billy. Like, it just is such a slow burn, and that's not necessarily a problem. And to be honest, if I went into this not knowing it was a Riley Sager book, I may have enjoyed it more. But because I already have all of his past stories in my head, I feel like I had some level of what I felt like I knew the book was going to be about, and it just fell short for me. I think also our lead character is a male for the very first time of any of his books, right? I'm pretty sure every other one, the lead is a female. So I feel like whereas I connect a lot with his female characters, I didn't really connect with Ethan all that much. And maybe it's because it's a male character and he's not very emotion-based, perhaps. I'm not sure. I don't know what it was. There are still themes of like grief and guilt and the things that I really, really enjoy and connect to in stories, but I just didn't connect to it as much. I will also say that I figured out a lot of the things, the like kind of twists in here, and I'll say I knew the killer really early on, but that is not a fault on his part. I don't know what it was. I don't feel like it was given away. I don't feel like it was obvious in any way, but probably like at least halfway through the book, I'm like, I know it's this person and I don't know how I know that. It was just more of a gut feeling. I'm not giving anything away, regardless of whether that is a specific person or somebody that they didn't know in the story. I don't know, a lot of things in here that, yeah, I just didn't connect with. I was really surprised how much I didn't enjoy this book. And again, it has nothing to do with Riley Sager's writing. He's an amazing writer. I love all of his books. This one just didn't connect with me as much. It really was just Ethan staying in the house. He jumps to conclusions really quickly, and he's just, yeah, he's kind of an odd protagonist for the story. I don't know, but that's where it is on the list. Next is The Hunting Party. I love Lucy Foley. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret that her newest book is somewhere in this category. I love her books so much. I've read quite a few of them. Oh, I think they're, oh yes, The Guest List. This one was my favorite other than the one that's over here. So I love The Guest List. It's like a slow burn, super well written, very character driven. Oh my god, I love that book so much. The Hunting Party. This is, again, it's so hard because this is just off of my ranking of the books, right? So it's not that I hated this book. It's not that I didn't enjoy this book. It's not that the writing was bad by any means. I still enjoyed the story. My only issue with this one, I guess I'll tell you what it's about. It says that there's a New Year's reunion in the remote Scottish wilderness, and then you have a few friends from, I believe they're friends from college, and they all get together, and they get together once a year to celebrate, and things go awry. Somebody ends up murdered, and she does this one in her newer book too, where you know someone's murdered but you don't know who it is, and so you have a dead body, and then you kind of go through and start at the beginning of the night and work your way back around to the dead body. It's really fun. That was already 15 minutes of me talking. Oh my god, this is gonna be a long video. Oh my gosh. So you have various couples, a group of friends, they're all staying in this remote cabin, and they go hunting and things like that. Yeah, it's called The Hunting Party. The only thing that I didn't like about this was there's one specific trope, and it's usually used in horror, I would say horror movies, probably more than even horror books. But there's one specific trope in here that I always just roll my eyes over, and it's probably because I've seen so many horror movies, and it is a consistent trope. But if I tell you what it is and you start reading the book, it'll give the book away and you'll know who done it from the very beginning. So I can't really say anything, but I will say I love that I read this one and her newest one because I can really compare them, and you can see so much growth in this author. Also, if you have ever gone to her Instagram and heard her talk, she is freaking adorable. So yeah, that's what I'll say about this one. I'm still glad that I read it, but it is on the lower side of books that I enjoyed. And it probably does belong more in this category, but I just felt like that category, there were only 3 books, but I guess it doesn't really matter. So I still enjoyed this one. It was just one of the tropes in there that wasn't my favorite. The next one that I read was Never Lie by Frida McFadden. No, this one I listened to on audiobook. And this one was fine. Like, there really wasn't anything too bad about it. Some stuff was predictable, some stuff wasn't. It's about a man and a woman. They're going house hunting, but they decide to do it in a giant winter storm, and then they go to the house and they get stuck in the house. And the house used to belong to a writer who disappeared, and then you kind of learn more about this writer and the writer's life, and so you have multiple timelines as well. And this one I honestly think was perfect to listen to on audiobook. Some audiobooks are too complex, there's too many characters to follow, or there's too much going on, multiple timelines, whatever it is, and that one was perfect. Honestly, like 2-4 main characters at the most, and just like an easy listen. It was a fine thriller. The next one was The Last Town by Blake Crouch. I talked about this one, and I know it's so surprising to me too that there's a book so low on the list that's a Blake Crouch book, because he is a fantastic writer. And this is what I mean. It's dependent on so many factors how you rank a book. But this one, absolutely loved the first one. It's about a man named, I think his name's Ethan too, right? Yeah, Ethan Burke. He's a Secret Service agent, and he goes to this town of Wayward Pines. Well, he wakes up there, I guess. He's on a mission to get there, and then he wakes up in the hospital because he's been in a car accident. He doesn't know if the town is trying to keep him in or someone else out, but everyone's acting kind of weird. He can't reach his family. Things are just, it feels almost like a Twilight Zone-y type book, and it's a blast. The first one is so fantastic. The second one, that's in here too, right? Yeah, the second one we'll get to soon, but the third one, things were just resolved so quickly. The second one set you up for just the end of times. Like, the most insane thing that could possibly happen is how the book ended. And this one, everything gets wrapped up in a perfect bow in 290 pages. And the first book had such a good pace to it. The second book, I feel like, was kind of slow and didn't have too much going on. And then the third book, I'm like, you just solved 8 huge, major life-changing events in 200 pages. It just felt so unsatisfyingly quick. And that's only reason why it's here. Otherwise, I mean, I freaking love Blake Crouch. She's absolutely fantastic. Oh no, don't look, don't cheat. The next one is Final Girls by Riley Sager. This, again, is lower than most Riley Sager books would be on my list. A lot of them are in, you know, higher up in here or in this category. I really do enjoy his writing. This particular one is about these final girls who have survived this extremely traumatic incident where all of their friends have been murdered, and the news people refer to them as final girls. So you have Quincy Carpenter, who's the main character in here. She survived a murder spree at a cabin. You also have a woman named Sam, who survived the sack man at a hotel. And then you also have a third who was like the original final girl, and her name was Lisa, and she survived a sorority house murder. So when Lisa turns up murdered, Sam and Quincy end up meeting for the first time, and they're nervous that whoever killed Lisa is after them as well. Here's the thing, I really like Riley Sager books because I think he thinks things through a lot, and the cool thing about this one was that you get kind of like a whole circle around these crimes. And what I mean by that is, like, you have the victims in the middle, but then you also have police officers, you have public defenders, you have all sorts of different people kind of surrounding them. Not that you get their perspective, but you almost get a feel for each side of what happens after a crime, right? Like the victims, the people that try to support them, the whole justice system as a whole. And so I really, really enjoyed that aspect of it. What I will say though is I thought that we were going to get a little bit more about each of the girls being involved in their murder sprees, and we definitely do get Quincy's. You know, we get pieces that she's trying to put together and trying to remember because her brain blocked a lot of stuff out. So we do get Quincy's, but man, I would have loved to hear more about the sack man and the sorority murders. And really at the core, it's more about the relationship between Quincy and Sam, and Quincy kind of finding herself, than it is about the murders at all. And so although I would have enjoyed more about that, I did really enjoy the story. It wasn't predictable. I didn't know what happened or what was going to happen at the end. Like, it was a good book. It was a good thriller. Like, this I feel like is a solid thriller book. So that is why it's there. The next one I feel like might be a little controversial, but I really enjoyed this one. This is One by One by Ruth Ware, and it's about a group of creators of this app. It's kind of like Spotify, but it's a music app and other people can listen to what you're listening to at the same time that you're listening to it. It's actually kind of a really cool concept. I wish it did exist. But anyways, all of these people are staying at a rustic ski chalet in the French Alps, but they're also working and trying to get people's opinions to switch about certain things. Like, it's definitely a work-oriented trip, and they're just kind of having fun with it. It just says that unless that company happens to be 8 coworkers, each with something to gain, something to lose, and something to hide. I can't really explain to you why I liked this one so much. I've read quite a few Ruth Ware books. I think my favorite is that Mrs. Westmore or something. It's a long title, something about Mrs. Westmore. Oh, it's right here. The Death of Mrs. Westaway. I really liked that one. And I know I've read other ones of her books. Oh, In a Dark, Dark Wood. Is that Ruth Ware? I don't know, but I've read quite a few. And this one, again, it was just such a good baseline thriller to me. Was it a little obvious, some of the stuff? Sure, but it was still entertaining enough that I really enjoyed it. So that's why it's there on the list. I read it during winter, and I absolutely love reading winter books during winter. So again, I don't know. And it's not like it snows here. I don't live in the French Alps. I live in Los Angeles, so I don't know, but I really enjoyed it. The next one I have here is Lisa Jewell, The Night She Disappeared. This is my lowest ranking Lisa Jewell book, and honestly, it has nothing to do with Lisa Jewell. It's my dumb American brain. The way that she writes, and I don't know if it's because they're based in Europe, and so like they're in England. Is it just in England? I think so. But the way that she writes, everything feels older than it is, and it's probably because I'm an American and we don't really have things like this. And so when I think of like old manners, not in this book but in a different book of hers, or boarding schools or things like that, I definitely think like 1800s, early 1900s. I don't know if it's exactly a boarding school, maybe that's not the correct word, I don't even think it says, but some sort of school where you go and you stay at the school. I apologize if boarding school is the wrong word, but anyways, because my brain kept telling me, oh, this is the early 1900s, and then it wasn't, there was just some conflicting thing that was happening in my brain that, I don't know, it felt older than it was. And so that's probably, I think, the only reason that I couldn't keep things straight in the story. Otherwise, it was entertaining. Girl and her boyfriend go missing. She went to her friend's house for a party, and then the couple that went missing, they're young, probably like 18. They have a daughter, and so now the mom a son, and so now the mom is caring for the son, not knowing what happened to her daughter. So okay, wait, can I explain this more challengingly? The grandma is caring for her grandson while her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend have disappeared. She has no idea what happened to them. She knows that she went to this party and everyone there is like, oh no, she's not here, she left. And so the case kind of goes cold. Then you have another woman and her boyfriend who go to work at that boarding school or whatever the school is called. The boyfriend works there, the girlfriend is just coming to stay with him. And she stumbles across some weird things that may or may not give more insight of what happened to that couple that disappeared. So you have multiple timelines and things. And yeah, I mean, I enjoyed Lisa Jewell. I still enjoyed this one. It's still a good book, still entertaining, but it's just not as good as some of her other books for me. And I honestly think it's all my fault, not hers. But the next one is The Silent Patient. This is by Alex Michaelides. Is that how you pronounce that? I honestly have no idea. This is everybody's favorite thriller book, and I think honestly it was just people hyped it up so much that I'm like, this better be the best book in the world. And I read it, and don't get me wrong, it's a decent thriller. The first 100 pages I was like, this is one of the best thrillers I've ever read. And then the next 100 pages happened and I was like, well, it's fine, you know. But the thing with this one, it's about a man. He's I don't even have the book with me, so forgive me if I'm using the incorrect terminology, but he's like some sort of therapist, a psychotherapist, and he takes on this silent patient. And supposedly she had murdered her husband and then gone silent and hasn't spoken since. And he is trying to help her figure things out. The only thing I would say about this one, really cool concept, cool ideas. I liked the metaphor and things like that. Like there's a lot of cool stuff going in here about like the snow and what it means and then where the book ends up. There's cool stuff, don't get me wrong. But there are some glaring issues that people are just okay looking over, and I don't understand how nobody has issues with these big plot holes in the book. That I'm like, well, no one, what do you mean? So that's why it's there on the list. Still an interesting read, so glad I read it. Next one is Wayward. This is number 2 by Blake Crouch. And again, I already told you what happens in the story about Wayward Pines, but this one, it was just really slow. He's in Wayward Pines, he's figured some stuff out, and he's just uncovering a little bit more about Wayward Pines in the story. And then it leads up into this crazy climax that kind of feeds into the beginning of the 3rd book. So that's why it's there. Next here we have Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. Oh, this book made me sob. This is an emotional one, I'm not gonna lie. This is about a girl named Ellie who disappears. And then you have kind of like the remains of her family left, meaning what her disappearance did to her family, how it really broke everyone apart. So you have her mother, her father, and they're separated now. And then you have a sister, and I think she has a brother as well. So Laurel is her mom, and she's just in ruins after her daughter had disappeared. You get, again, that dual timeline where you get to see kind of Ellie and who she is as a person, and her kind of coming to age, becoming a woman kind of thing, like, you know, getting her first boyfriend and graduating school and thinking about what comes after that. And then you have this new timeline where Laurel is just trying to exist in a world that her daughter isn't with her in, and it's really fucking heartbreaking. Man, it's a sad book. Anyways, what ends up happening is that Laurel starts dating this man, and the man has a daughter. He's a single father, and his daughter reminds her a lot of Ellie, who had gone missing. So she starts to, you know, have a relationship with this girl, and I don't know if it's healing to her or harming her, or maybe a little bit of both, since it is about her daughter. But yeah, you just go on this whole crazy ride about how this girl reminds her of her daughter, and then you get to find out Ellie's story, and it's just sad. It's sad and it's good, and that's a good bucket book. Okay, now let's go to my, these are my favorite books of the year. Oh look, another Lisa Jewell book. There's quite a few of these. This one is The Family Upstairs by Lisa Jewell. I loved this book. I thought that this was so fun. This is another Lisa Jewell book where my mind tells me that it takes place in the early 1900s, and I think it takes place in the 80s or something, but because they have this old manor. So anyways, this one is about a girl named Libby. On her 25th birthday, I believe, yeah, 25 years, she gets the inheritance of this house. And in her past, what happened was she was found in a house where a murder-suicide took place. It seemed like there was a cult that lived there, and she was the byproduct of the parents who were in that murder-suicide pact, whatever happened. She ended up getting adopted. And so for 25 years, people have been trying to figure out what actually happened at that house. And it still remains a mystery. Even some of the people that were involved remain a mystery. You have the story of Libby, her inheriting the house, and trying to figure out who she is, where she came from. And then you have multiple timelines where you go back in time to, I believe it's the 80s, and you see this cult-like family relationship play out. And it's creepy and it's fun to read about, and it's super entertaining and engaging, and obviously like it sucks and it's sad and stuff for the kids, but it's really, really entertaining. And then along with that, you're also following a woman who's a single mom, and she's trying to make ends meet, having a really difficult time, and is somehow connected with the story. And then you also have other people too. There's a lot going on in this. So yeah, you get just varying perspectives of these people, and then eventually everything comes back around and ends up, and you figure out what happened and who Libby really is, and it's a freaking interesting book. I really, really enjoyed that one. Next on the list is Lisa Jewell's None of This Is True. Oh my gosh, I loved this. I loved this book. This was my first Lisa Jewell book that I read this year, and I went, oh, I have to go back and read everything she's ever written. I thought somebody screamed, but I think it was someone's brakes. Anyways, fantastic book. It's about Alex and Josie. They meet because they both are celebrating their birthdays. They have a birthday dinner at the same restaurant. They're the same age. So Josie's like, this is weird. And she starts kind of internet stalking Alex and finds that Alex is kind of this famous podcaster. And it seems like kind of has a lot of things that Josie wishes she has. A lot of friends, she's very beautiful, outgoing, she's successful, whereas Josie has kind of taken the back seat her whole life because she's married an older man and kind of just devoted her life to raising her two girls. She ends up meeting back up with Alex, and because Alex has a podcast and a lot of her podcasts revolve around the stories of women, Josie asks, would you like to make a podcast about me? Now, from the very beginning, you know something happened, something went down, because there's a Netflix documentary about what happened, and it's called like the birthday hey, you're my birthday twin or something like that. And so you know that something went down, but you don't quite know what. And so you get glimpses of this documentary, and then you also go back to the beginning and kind of, again, circle back around and figure out who Josie really is. Alex at first doesn't want to make the podcast about her, but the more she learns about Josie, she's definitely more intrigued. Josie's kind of weird. She's socially awkward. She kind of inserts herself into Alex's life more than Alex would like. And yeah, the story just continues from there. I really loved this book. I thought that this was such a unique thriller, so different from any other thriller that I've ever read before, and I loved it. I loved Alex. I even loved Josie because she's such a real character. I talked about this when I reviewed the book, but she reminded me of someone that I met in real life. Not maybe to the extent Josie was, but just like kind of weird, something's off about this person, try to insert themselves in your life kind of thing. And yeah, I don't know. I loved this story. I thought that this was one of the best thriller books I've ever read. The next one is Body Double by Tess Gerritsen. This one's a little hard because it's number 4 in the Rizzoli and Isles series, so I'm not saying like run out and buy this one, but I just did want to put it in here and mention it because this was such a cool book. This one you get more of Maura Isles. This is kind of the first, well, she's in a lot in the third book as well, but this we really get to learn more about Maura. And what ends up happening is a woman is killed outside of Maura Isles' house that looks identical to her. And she finds out it's her twin sister, and she didn't even know she had a sister. There's a lot of themes in here about just like death and birth and rebirth and coming to terms with who you are and finding out your past, and there's just some cool stuff in here. I love this book. Again, it's the 4th of the series, so I wouldn't suggest starting with this one, but if you want a good series to pick up, The Surgeon is the first, and they are great. I would say the second one has been the only one that I've just been like, it's okay, but these are great freaking books. I always say that I equate them to like Silence of the Lambs type stories, and they are. They're so awesome. So you just go with Maura trying to figure out who the woman was and why she got murdered, and if they were after Maura or if they were after her and what's going on. And yeah, I loved this one. I thought it was a blast. Now, my friends, the best book that I've read this year, the best thriller, The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. Holy crap! This was such a good book. So, reading The Hunting Party and reading some other of her books, like I said, she's always been a good writer. I've always enjoyed her work. I really, really, really like The Guest List. That book's fantastic. But comparing something like The Hunting Party to this, you really do get to see the growth of this writer. And that's one of my favorite things reading books from people, is you get to see how much better they get at their craft. And this, I believe, is evidence of that. What a fantastic book. So whereas The Hunting Party, it was still well written, it was still entertaining, you still had multiple perspectives, still had a death, and then you go wrap around and try to figure out who done it. This one, you have multiple timelines, you have multiple perspectives, you have so many different things that are woven to make this one story. Oh, it's so fantastic. So this is about a woman named Francesca. She has received that mansion that her grandparents owned in their will after they passed away. But instead of going back and revisiting what life was like as a teen and just kind of living there, she decides to renovate it and make it this whole fancy schmancy place to stay with spa and good food and these little cabins that you can rent out, and it's just top of the line fancy stuff. She's a bit of a socialite. So you have that of her, doing that. And then you also have this added element where the town is pretty upset at her for blocking off these trails because she says that it's her land and they've always been used by locals, but now she's like, you can't use them, you can't go to the beach, you can't walk through the woods, you can't use any of my land. So the locals are pretty pissed off about her. Then you also have the perspective of a local boy who his family owns a farm nearby. So you get more of the perspective of the locals in there. You also have a woman who's from Francesca's past who comes and rents a room here to try to speak to Francesca about their past and what ended up happening between them. You also have Francesca's husband, he's her husband, who helped her renovate the hotel, and you get each of these person's perspectives. And the timelines, you get the current timeline, and then you also get the timeline of when that other girl, Bella, that's her name, when they were younger. So you get to see Francesca as a young girl, you get to see her as an adult, and then you're kind of filling in the blanks and trying to figure out what happened. You also get another timeline in the future, like a few days in the future, that a murder takes place. And so you get the detectives that are working on the case and trying to figure out who got killed and why they got killed. And you don't know who it is going out the whole thing. You don't even know if it's a guy, if it's a girl, you know nothing. If it's kid, adult, nothing. I really loved the kind of horror folklore elements in here. I didn't really do a great job describing this in my reading wrap up, but there are these things called the birds, and they're not actually birds. They're like people in the woods that dress as birds, and they're kind of the folklore of the town, and nobody knows if they're real or not, but they seem to kind of like dish out some karma onto people that do some bad things, or supposedly that's, you know, the lore around the town. Nobody quite knows if they're real or not. There's just so much going on in here, and I found it so entertaining. And so I gave this a 5 stars. I gave it like a 4.9, which is nearly impossible for me to rate a thriller book that high. Like these 3 books right here, super impressive thrillers. So when I went on Goodreads, I was like, this is gonna have the best ratings, and it has a 3.7, which isn't terrible, but that usually isn't what the really great thriller books are rated. So I was really confused by it, but I did read a few of the reviews, and a lot of people, it seems that a lot of people that rated it lower were listening to it on audiobook, and they said that it could be kind of confusing, and I would totally agree with that. If I listened to this on audiobook, I think I would miss out on things. I think that I wouldn't have had as good of an experience with it because there's so much going on in this story. And a lot of thrillers are like that Freida McFadden one, where there's a few main characters, a few things happening, and they're super easy to listen to on audiobook. So I would argue that a lot of people listen to thrillers on audiobook, but this one, because there's so much going on, and I feel like it does kind of step into the horror genre a little bit, that I feel like this is just better to read. So please read it if you get the chance. I mean, if you want to, you know, like if you're thinking about picking it up, pick up a copy or download it on Kindle or something, because this was one of the best thriller books I've ever read. I love this, and look at how beautiful this cover is. It's one of the prettiest covers ever. So yeah, those are my rankings of all the thriller books that I've read this year. Let me know what you guys think about these, if you guys have read any of these. If you guys disagree with me, agree with me, let me know. It's always really interesting, even when you guys say, oh, I hated that book and I loved it. It's just cool to see how differently each person interprets and analyzes and enjoys a book. It really is just subjective to the reader. So let me know what your favorite thriller books have read this year, or give me a ranking down below if you guys have that as well. I'd love to see what you guys are reading. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry this was so long-winded, but I just wanted to, talk about that. And I'll be back soon, and we'll rank every book that I've read this year besides the thrillers. So yeah, thank you for watching. I'll see you soon with another horror video. Okay, thank you, bye!
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.